Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sandbeast YouTube channel. As always, my name is David Foxon. We're joined by Rebecca Horton, who I've been trying, who's been on my target list. The actual effort on my side has been pretty minimal, but has been on my target list for a big interview since 2023 when we came up with the big interview idea. We've got a long list of epic people in the ITAM industry, but for June's version of the big interview, already halfway through the year, we have managed to get Rebecca on. Hello, Rebecca. How the devil are you?
Hi, it's great to finally be here. I am really, really honored. I've been so jealous of everybody that got to do this with you. So I'm glad it's finally my turn. I'm thrilled.
No, you've been on the list since day one. I promise you. I've got my OneNote list. You've been on the list since day one. It's just yeah, the effort on my part to actually arrange it's been really poor, but we got there in the end.
You're a popular man. That's all I
No,
can
no,
say.
definitely not, definitely not. So yeah, Jim, before we start, and because the main focus on this one is going to be around open source licensing, which is quite appropriate considering the video we did a few months ago now. But in actual times, smoke and mirrors. We're actually recording this in April. It's coming out in June. We've just done a video with Alex about open source, about a German smoke and mirrors. It's how it all works. We plan these things. It's not just off the cuff. It's not just off the whim. We do actually plan this. But open source licensing is a big topic at the moment. But before we dig into that and why ITAM should care, should you just say hello, introduce yourself? What's your ITAM
Oh,
experience? That kind of stuff.
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Rebecca Horton. I'm currently Vice President of Red Hat and IBM Global Service Delivery over at Anglepoint. So I've been there for about a year and a half now, almost coming up on. So it's been a great move. It's been really exciting. Anglepoint was always one of those places I wanted to kind of hang my hat, and it's been really thrilling to be there and get to know the team and meet a bunch of new clients with lots of new challenges, open source being one of them. So it's been fantastic. I'm coming up on, gosh, 18 years, I think it is, in this crazy industry.
Nice.
And my journey with open source really started just before I worked at Red Hat, which I think was back in 16 or 17 or something like that, where I just learned just kind of this whole new world of open source, had never understood what the challenges were, why it was important, in some cases even what it was. So I've been really, kind of focused on the whole world of open source, and it's led to some really interesting conversations with experts and clients, and it's been really fun to continue to see it evolve. So I'm really excited to share kind of my more recent experience and what I'm seeing in the industry.
Nice. So short interview though, because obviously open source, ITAM doesn't really have to worry about it because it's free, right?
No, that is not the case. Yeah, that is
Shock
not, that
horror.
is, I know, shocked and amazed. A lot of organizations kind of think that. And I think part of that harkens back to, you had a team full of very expensive developers, sitting in the basement of the building, pushing back Red Bulls and Doritos. And your only cost was the cost of those guys, and they were the ones who knew that code inside and out, and they were the one controlling it and driving the usage of it. And it wasn't until people started to realize, and some things happened in the industry, which I'll talk about, that people kind of started going, oh, wait a second, this is both a risk and also potentially an opportunity for us to actually kind of wrap our hands around open source, kind of broadly, specifically there's kind of two areas that most organizations focus on. One of them is open source that is delivered by third party vendors like Oracle, IBM, Red Hat, SUSE, etc. But also the concept of open source hygiene, which is really interesting, which is, do you know where your code comes from? Do you know if it's clean? Do you know if it's secure? And that opens up doors to whole other areas that typically SAM doesn't get involved in, but it's a great platform for SAM to have conversations with the broader business about when it comes to security, governance, controls, and all of those kinds of things, where SAM's really trying to raise its profile and have a different type of conversation that isn't just cost risk, license compliance risk, because typically those aren't as big of a factor in open source.
No, it's. Do you know what? To be very honest, when all throughout, the career in ITAM that I've had, and the clients, and the when I was a permanent employee, etc., open source always kind of felt like just do it. Don't let's not focus on that right now. Okay, we've got Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, SAP, Autodesk. We got so much licensable stuff that we really need to be focused on. Just don't worry, it's free. You're all good. Don't worry about it. We'll do that eventually at some point. But why is it important now in 2025? I mean, you've given some awesome examples there, but for ITAM people that are maybe not focusing on it themselves, but maybe being directed by their leadership team not to worry at the moment about open source, why should they be managing open source from an ITAM perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk on those two tracks, right? The first is, and I think quite obviously, the third-party open source, right? So you've got your vendors that that are delivering open source code, and it's wrapped with the service. So the open source is free. It's still free, okay? But what you're paying for quite often is the services and the support that's wrapped around it. So we'll use Red Hat as an example. You're not buying the code, you're buying the services wrapped around it. So the phone support, the web support, access to their knowledge base, all of that kind of stuff. It's important because there's a cost, and there is a compliance factor, but it's not a license compliance factor, it's a service compliance factor. So the way that vendors like Red Hat and others calculate what to charge you from a services perspective is by counting the number of subscriptions to the various products that are being consumed and used. So for example, if you deploy 100 instances of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you then have to pay for 100 subscriptions for the services that wrap around the Red Hat Enterprise Linux instances, not the software, the services that wrap around it. So a lot of organizations really struggle with managing those, the number of instances, the number of deployments that they have for a couple of different reasons. Number one, open source can quite often be very difficult to discover, particularly in the middleware space. Middleware is really, really hard to discover. The other challenge is open source code in itself is actually quite common and can look very similar regardless of who you get it from. So I see lots of situations where a customer is giving me discovery data and they'll say, oh, this is CentOS or this is SUSE, but actually their discovery tool thinks that it's Red Hat, or thinks that it's Oracle, or thinks that it's IBM. And what the discovery tools are looking for are quite often certs. And so one of the areas that customers often get in trouble with as well is when they've taken, for example, a SUSE base code and converted it into Red Hat. Those certs are still hidden deep in there. And so it can be really, really hard to just wrap your arms around not only what is it, where is it installed, who's using it, but actually really figuring out and getting to the root of who did I get this from? Where did this come from? Was this SUSE? Is it SUSE? Is it Red Hat? Is it IBM? Which then gets us over to the conversation about code hygiene. You've got to keep that code clean. You have to know who it's come from, what it actually is, and especially what it's being used for. So one example that I use and I refer to quite often is a big financial organization, probably about 7 years ago, that many of us remember, who had a data breach, and they found some open source code that they had some, let's call it security potential risks in. Well, a few months later, those risks, those gaps in that code were taken advantage of by hackers. And that led us to one of the, at the time, most expensive data breaches in history. They knew about that code. And they kind of went, like many organizations, we'll worry about it later. And they got bit by that one big time. So this concept of open source code, and I love to use this analogy because I'm not technical. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm not technical, but boy, did I love playing with Lego when I was young. And if you think about open source code as that big bucket of Lego that you used to play with, and you'd dig around and find all your pieces and you'd build your house or your car or your rocket or whatever it was that, you know, your imagination came up with. That's open source code. Well, remember when your buddy used to come over and he had a cold and he would wipe his nose and then dig his hand into your Lego, and you're looking at your Lego going, ew, now I got to stick my hand in there? That's what happens with open source too, is you don't know where that code is coming from or who's had their dirty fingers in it. So you've really got to be able to control and understand and go down to a deep, deep discovery and code level analysis level to understand what are your risks with regards to this code outside of the third-party vendor side. Really, it boils down to how good, how clean are my Legos? How clean is my code?
So I love that analogy, but something that, and my open source knowledge is nowhere near where it should be, I'll be honest, but with the current way of the world and security and some angry people out there,
yeah.
What is open source almost the community driven ones anyway? Is that a vulnerability from someone using open source almost to like weaponize it? And is that because that bit always, I don't know. It's one of the things that whenever you see something that's community driven open source, and look, hands up, I love some of the licensing terms in there where it's like, if you ever see me in a bar, you can use this software, but you got to buy me 2 beers and a steak dinner or something. Brilliant, hilarious, fun. When you send that to your security teams, they don't quite find it as funny, but I certainly do when I'm reading through it. But that always is in the back of my head, is these community-driven ones that anyone can go in and update, like with maybe a really negative way of seeing the world at the moment, but could that be in the wrong hands? And it just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of statistics out there, and there's a stat, and take it for what it's worth, but roughly speaking, 60% of all security attacks, zero-day attacks, actually are focused on open source technology.
Right.
So a lot of the risk that you have around security is actually in your open source. And when you think about the fact that most business critical systems are actually built on open source, that's where it becomes a huge concern to organizations, and it becomes both a governance and a security concern. So, for example, I think it's around 90% of all airline booking systems are built on open source. 100% of financial trading systems are built on open source. Roughly 80 to 90% of other types of banking systems are open source. 100% of websites are built on open source. So when you think about the proliferation of open source and where it exists on these business critical systems, the systems that they use to book revenue, to interact with clients, to just exist, it's all open source. I mean, Tesla is a great example. It's open source. Tesla isn't a car company, they're a software company, and it's all open source. So when you think about, okay, as an organization, what are my risks? Your real risks, for sure, okay, SAP, Microsoft, all of that kind of stuff. But really, the things that are going to cost you $1 million a minute if they go down are probably back-ended by open source.
You scared me. Those stats, they're... What? Wow, okay. That's really put me on the back. I didn't realize it would be
Yeah.
that high, especially everything to do with finance. Just personally as well. Speaking personally, like airlines, banking, and stuff like that. That's oh, okay,
Scary.
yeah.
Yeah,
That
it
is.
really is. Yeah, it's scary. So, you've got these hackers out there, and a lot of them are focused on open source. And an interesting thing that we see is when older versions, and let's just use Red Hat Enterprise Linux as an example. So last year, I think it was June 30th, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 went end of life. So now, if you want to continue to get critical security patches for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, if you're still using it, you have to pay for an extra subscription to Red Hat called Extended Lifecycle Support, right? If you're not paying for that, you're not getting your updated security critical patches. We often see that as soon as a version of open source goes end of life, third party supported end of life, we see a huge spike in the attempted attacks on those older versions. So these guys are literally just sitting there waiting for you to drop your guard and then take advantage of those risks in your code and leverage those for 0-day attacks.
Wow. Okay. There's that. I mean, we've already like 16 minutes in, but that is a heck of a lot of justification for ITAM to start paying attention to open source. On the Tesla one,
Yeah.
like, so for example, if that's a lot of it's built on open source, is there any, if there was someone smart enough to do it, could they, like in America, they've got where it drives itself, right? We're not allowed that in
Yeah.
the UK, and I'm not sure if you're allowed it in Europe. Maybe you are, but could they hack that by any
They have.
chance?
They have.
What? No.
Absolutely. Gosh, I can't remember all of the details. It was a few years ago now, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that it was Tesla. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to get sued by Elon. But I do recall a few years ago that somebody with a self-driving auto capability, they were hacked. And they had all these people that were just kind of like, they'd stop in the middle of the road, didn't really know what was going on, doors were locking. I
Oh
mean,
my.
it's absolutely, yeah, it's crazy to think what can potentially happen in this world if somebody got really, really smart and started looking really hard for those gaps in your Lego.
That's mad.
Yeah.
Like that. I have seen last year there was in the US, I think it was, they do have these self-driving cars that was taking someone to an airport, and there's just that the video that went viral of this guy ringing the support desk going, your car's just driving round and round in a circle, it's locked the doors, I can't get out, I'm going to miss my flight. And this poor I think it was a lady was on the phone going, I'm trying to override it, I can't connect to your car. It's like, what,
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep going round and round. She's like, until the battery runs out, probably. But that's mad. I mean, again, Rebecca, I'm thinking very obviously negative here and morbid, but every time you turn on the news now, all you get hit with is horrible stuff. So that
Yeah.
is that is kind of a bit of a, particularly personally as well, when you're thinking about all the banking apps that you're using, when you're thinking about, all the details you're putting into airlines, all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. That's wow. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that high. Now
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that my security is,
Yeah.
is
Exactly, exactly. And as someone in the ITAM industry, we are uniquely positioned to be able to have a holistic view, not just of the systems that are running the open source, but also the systems that are touching and
right.
connected to the other open source technologies, right? Because it's not one or the other. It's quite often a layered set of technologies that are creating these business solutions. And so, if I go back to that earlier point that I made around where Sam is looking for an opportunity to elevate its position in the organization, we absolutely should be having conversations with other parts of the business that are
Mm.
traditionally sort of adjacent to Sam, right? Quite often we're aligned and well aligned with, procurement and vendor management and finance. And we probably touch a little bit on, our tech administration teams, probably developers. But really what you want to be doing is getting deep into those practices. And our entry door, I guess you could say, into those conversations is quite often open source. So have conversations with the security team. Hey, what are our concerns about open source, whether it's third-party supported or not? Do we believe that we have the full visibility that we need? And how do we round out that in-depth view using SAM technologies, or even introducing potentially new types of discovery technologies that can get us to a code level if we're ready to be there? And then you want to also talk about governance, right? What are the rules that we're putting in place about where we source our code from? Is it trusted? Who's using it? Where is it being distributed to? What are the rules around the use of our open source technology? And what are the practices that we're putting in place to, on an ongoing basis, monitor, measure, and report on both the third-party vendor compliance side of it, but also the open source code health of it?
So again, it's going back to that. Always ends up down the road, doesn't it? Open source and the governance and the managing it. I've even been in some clients where there's no kind of approval process. If it's open source, it's from a commercial standpoint, it's free. Obviously, if there's services attached to it where it could become a paid for thing, then it goes through proper process. But if it's genuine open source, a lot of clients just go, it's fine, just approve it, go for it, do whatever, because they don't have the time, the bandwidth, or the resources to go through and do all of that. And ITAM, I fully understand that from the ITAM people's perspective. They're under a lot of pressure to do Microsoft renewals, hardware asset management, helping out with FinOps. That open source kind of gets forgotten about, but with all the stuff that you've said, it should definitely not be forgotten about. But that's an interesting point there as well. You mentioned about the ones that are third party supported. Like, what are the differences between ones that have the might of a Red Hat or a third party with the services and the control wrapped around that, compared to one that is literally just out in the wild, community updated, community driven? Like, what are the actual differences between those two? And should we be more concerned about the community ones because they don't have the might of a Red Hat behind it?
Yeah, I'll use Red Hat as an example again because I work there, and it's easy. Third-party vendors like Red Hat, what they essentially do is they enterprise ready and harden their software, right? So Red Hat is actually one of the biggest, if not the single biggest, contributor to the community, particularly for Linux, in the entire community network, right? So they are at the grassroots of developing the code. And then what they do is they package it, compile it, harden it for the enterprise. So it is put together in a slightly different way. Again, if we go back to that analogy of the Lego, when you go to the community, you're getting the raw Lego pieces. When you go to Red Hat, you're getting a pre-built house or a pre-built car or a pre-built spaceship, whatever it is that you're looking for. So you know that you can, to a certain extent, trust what you're getting. Also, if anything goes wrong with that code, they're committed to helping you fix it, protect it, stand behind or stand beside you if there's problems and issues. Whereas, again, if you're going to the community and you're just getting that raw code, if something goes wrong with it, you're kind of on your own. You've got to figure it out. So, a lot of organizations, when they're looking at, where are they going to get their open source code from, because it's not an option to not get it from somewhere, that's quite often why they do make the investment in those third-party provided software providers, code providers like Red Hat and Oracle and IBM and whatnot. And then that's where it makes definitely a lot more sense to apply those traditional SAM and ITAM practices, with regards to discovery and compliance monitoring, but also still introducing, if you haven't already, the concept of governance and control and security and having those conversations.
Do you think open source is going to see even more of a resurgence than it has with the dwindling software budgets that organizations have?
Absolutely. I mean, we continue to see it rise. One of the biggest changes that we're seeing right now is I get contacted almost daily from customers who are looking to move from VMware post Broadcom acquisition over to open source technologies like OpenShift, Ansible, and OpenStack, all of which have both a community version and a fully Red Hat supported version. So we're absolutely seeing the rise of open source continue, and vendors like Red Hat are absolutely benefiting from what's going on and budget constraints with other vendors that are providing similarly solution software.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, the video that I referenced at the beginning, which again, Smoke and Mirrors, we actually did. Yeah, it came out today, but yeah, how this works. This is coming out in June. Was the German local province that are planning and committing to move 30,000 devices away from Windows to Linux and from M365 to LibreOffice. Like
Yep.
that's going to be no small chunk of change in terms of Microsoft savings, is there? But
It's
my argument that is, like, with all 30,000 people, that's a lot. Like, not all of them are going to be tech savvy, right? I've been in organisations where I've had to create, or I've requested as part of the project that's doing it, videos, knowledge articles, guides, just on where things are. Where this button is, where that icon is, how to search for something. I was like, if they're moving operating system and Office, oh my god, the hypercare for that, just for people knowing what to click, is going to have to be massive.
it's really, really crazy. So I was just having that conversation with someone 2 days ago, and I was saying to them, it's not just the cost of moving. From like a licensing perspective,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to save this and we can direct that elsewhere. The big part of those savings that they get in those, I would say, first 1, 2, 3 years at least, it should be immediately reinvested into super strong change management practices, because they are going to have to essentially retrain 30,000 people how to do their job and exist with the technology that they've been used to for 10, 15,
Yeah.
20, 25 years. That's going to be a massive uplift for them. So they're going to have a strong plan on how to even just accomplish that and support those users. Otherwise, they're going to have, very similar to a client that I worked with many years ago, they made the decision to move off of Microsoft and go over to Google. And
Ooh.
within probably a year had reversed that decision, merely because they hadn't put in place the right change management practices to support the people through those changes. So it'll be interesting to see what
Oh.
happens.
That's the worst, though, isn't it? Having to go back to Microsoft with your tail between your legs. Hi guys. Really sorry about what happened a year ago. Yeah, we really do love you. Um, please, can we have the same level of discounts that we had last time? Pretty, please. Come on, guys. We
Yeah.
love you. But no, I really hope we hear more about this German government province,
Yeah.
what they do, how it works, etc. And yeah, like, are we going to see in 18 months' time they've gone back to Microsoft with their tail between their legs because it didn't work properly?
Yeah.
But no, really interesting. And actually, that leads me nicely on to my next question, which is, you're no longer at Angle Point, okay? Newsflash. That's it. You've decided it's not for you anymore. You are
Yeah.
back as an ITAM manager for an end user organization.
Yeah.
Let's say, how many seats do you have? Yeah, you're a decent size. You've got like 20 to 50,000 seats. You're okay. You've got a good size there. What would you be doing as an ITAM manager to start looking at your open source estate? And you mentioned the governance and controls. What would you be looking to implement as an ITAM person for your new organization?
Yeah. I think, step one, of course, is getting to know who cares about it, right? So reaching out to the different groups, security, governance, FinOps, right? There's tons of open source being used in the cloud environment. So talk to all the different teams. My best advice for anyone in the ITAM industry that's looking to really affect change is ask those people what their goals are, not tell them what your goals are. If you can align ITAM goals with business goals, you've got a winning combination for buy-in and support from those other teams and business areas. So don't go to the FinOps team or the security team saying, ITAM can help you do X, Y, Z. Start with asking the question, hey, CTO, CIO, CSO, what are your goals and objectives for this year? Tell me about the challenges. What are the things that are keeping you up at night? And then take that away and figure out how ITAM can help. So that would be my first step. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be worried about how do I keep my data and my information secure? How do I continue to be agile in an ever-changing cloud and cloud-driven environment? And how do I help my developers move fast, right? So those are going to be the things that are probably keeping them up at night, all of which support how do we sell more stuff, whatever their stuff is, right? That's when you talk to a CEO, he's like, help me sell more stuff. Okay. And then you peel back the layers and then you figure out what are the things that need to happen in order to help sell more stuff. And if you can then turn software asset management into a conversation about agility or about improved DevOps, being faster to market with improved solutions, and ultimately then what all of those really peel back to from a SAM perspective is how do I make sure that you have the right assets at the right time to be able to move fast, be agile, have that visibility into what is where and who's using it and what systems is it connected to, what data is it transporting. If you can show them that you've got those capabilities, you've got that information, you've got those practices to support, then you're going to have 3 at least new people that are going to love you and want to work with your SAM team.
Just full disclaimer, we don't guarantee love.
Yeah.
Okay, just they'll like you in an appropriate way within a business working environment. Yeah, nice. So, what in terms of the governance and controls, would you for open source piggyback off any existing SAM processes when it comes to that, or would you have bespoke? Like a software request one. Would you have a bespoke bit just aimed at open source to make sure that your security teams, for example, are looking at it, etc.?
Yeah, I think the answer to both is yes. So there are quite a few that actually overlap. There's absolutely things like software request, right? You want to make sure that if you're getting requests for, random community code, open source tools that people want to use, even things like AI, you want to make sure that you're getting it, again, from a trusted environment, a trusted place, and it's being used in a way that does not expose you to potential risk. So what kind of data, let's use AI because everybody's talking about it. If you're plopping something into ChatGPT, is ChatGPT using that information, that data? Where's it going? Can you control that? Can you limit things like ChatGPT as to where the data goes or who has access to it, or whether they're incorporating your data into their large language models? Is huge, and we're seeing that all the time. So that's an example of where a simple software request process could become really very much a governance conversation, and you want to really dig into those things. And then the other ones that are a little bit more custom and bespoke would be doing things like taking advantage of vendors like Black Duck and other organizations that specialize in open source code hygiene to be able to take a really deep look into the potential vulnerabilities in your code at a code level, whether you're doing that, annually, quarterly, or even monthly. It all depends. How frequent do we need to do it based on the potential or perceived risk of the systems that we're looking at and analyzing? So you're not always going to have the same governance rules for every system. You're going to have more frequent reviews, more frequent governance assessments, security assessments done on those systems that are more business critical. And then other ones that are slightly less business critical, you might kind of do once a year or once every 2 years. The goal really is be doing it.
Nice. No, I like that. Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about the ongoing changes to the code that could be occurring that could create vulnerabilities. Like, how often did you say? Every, half a year, or is it more frequent?
Yeah, it all depends on the system. So some
Right.
systems, for example, that might be, really far behind your firewalls, maybe they're not connected to business critical systems. Those you could probably get away with doing once a year or once every 2 years. Those ones that are, again, business critical to how you exist as a business, things like your banking systems, things like your airline booking systems, those are going to be ones that you're probably going to want to do on a much more frequent basis, maybe even real-time code analysis, right? So who
Oh,
knows?
okay. Okay, real-time code analysis. Well, I mean, is it what it says on the tin? It's
Yeah,
literally.
yeah, it's on an ongoing basis, continually looking at your code to identify potential new vulnerabilities that could be coming out in real time. Absolutely.
Oh, oh, okay. I like that. Okay. That surely then that makes, is that for both community driven and third party?
Yep. Yep.
That seems
Yep.
like something people should be doing more of.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's where those vendors, those specialist vendors come in. Is there are organizations out there that have a really close relationship and sort of tie into the community. And as the community discovers these vulnerabilities and are posting about them, they're immediately pulling them, testing them, and then just redistributing either notifications with, this is how you fix it, or at the very least, notifications about threats.
Wow, that is cool. That is really cool. I like that. I think that would also be your infosec team's best friend tool
Yeah.
for open source as well. That would. But as an ITAM, I'd love, because infosec they rarely give you all the keys to their tools, right? You just get like a view only access, a reporting access. There's only certain things you can do. And
Yeah.
like, oh guys, come on, just I need to know. I'm ITAM, right? I need to know. I need to let our users know if there's any changes that we're, an update or something. We have to come on. Let me just see what's happening. Wow, real
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which is really interesting. Quite a few years ago, I did a session on, sort of data and data as a currency. And as an ITAM person, and if you're going out and again talking to those infosec people, the governance people, anybody who has data, data really is your currency. It's your power within your organization. If you can either give people data or figure out how to show them the value of sharing that data with you, then that is your most powerful currency in order, again, to affect change within your business and really to, again, drive to those business goals and objectives.
Nice. Data is your currency. Nice. Just very quickly, you mentioned about all the discovery stuff. Again, if you're back in your ITAM role, single person, obviously, because ITAM teams never get a lot of resources. How are you discovering open source stuff? You mentioned there, is just general ITAM tools? Is there anything else that I could be looking at to discover open source stuff?
Yeah, as with a lot of things, my general rule is always don't look to one source, look to as many sources as you possibly can and create your own little data lake,
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. There's obviously the SAM tool vendors. Most of them do a pretty decent job of discovering the third-party vendor open source, not so much the community code level. It really depends on the tool provider. I don't want to call anybody out or say anybody who's better than any of the others, but they all do, I would say, a pretty decent job. But absolutely, then there's other tools out there. I'll mention one, which is Red Hat Discovery, which used to be a part of Ansible, that Red Hat kind of broke away from the Ansible product and kind of has now created their own product, which is Red Hat Discovery, which is 100% free. And it does actually a pretty good job. Again, not perfect, but it does a pretty good job of discovering pretty much anything. Again, because it was part of Ansible, which is an orchestration tool, it was designed to be able to discover almost anything on your network. So it's sort of like a sniffer technology. So it can go out and get pretty much anything on a network range that it's pointed at. And then you can use that data for whatever purpose you want, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's IBM, or whether it's open source. So for example, I'll get exports from Red Hat Discovery quite often, and what I'll see is actually not just the Red Hat products, but I'll see all of the CentOS and the SUSE and all of the other, code level, just as an example, just the Linux stuff, never mind all of the other products. Yeah.
Nice. And two more questions, but the penultimate one, if you've got, and you haven't been prepped for this either, because I want that organic, raw reply. If you look into your magic crystal ball into the future, what do you see as the future for open source? Is it just going to keep expanding and growing? Is AI going to start taking over and developing its own code? What's the future?
Well, AI is open source.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it already is. But yeah, I mean, I think as we continue, really to have technology drive our lives, let's be real, open source is the way of the future. All of those self-driving cars. Let's be real. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of those apps that we have our faces in 24/7, it's all open source.
That bit is, I didn't realize that as I closed my LinkedIn tab, my Chat GPT tab. I think that's I've learned a lot. Like I said, my open source knowledge isn't great anyway, but you've scared me. But you've also taught me a lot. But the last question I wanted to ask you is more of a personal thing. Is like, what about ITAM, open source licensing? What do you love? What motivates you every day from a professional standpoint?
I would say there's probably two things that really just get me going all the time. And the first one is I love to learn. And as someone who, again, is not even a little bit technical, right? This is the place for me because I can learn about technology. I can be part of companies doing cool things with technology without actually having to be technical. So I love that. But I think the other side of it is, especially now later on in my career, it's the leadership side. I was so blessed in my career to have people who supported me in my early days, who saw something in me, who encouraged me, people like yourself and all of the other amazing industry leaders and experts who I learned from and kind of saw up on stage and went, I want to be one of them one day, and my team, the teams that I have the absolute pleasure of leading and mentoring and coaching, those are the two things that really kind of keep me going every day. I love it.
Nice. So it's evolved from that technical, non-technical, the more the licensing side of things, the more, computery things, to mentorship, leadership, developing other people. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah. It's really, it's been such a pleasure. Like I said, I've had, Sherry Irwin, I have to call her out. I learned so much from her when I worked with her on a contract many years ago. Wes Hargraves, who is in Canada, and he's a local Microsoft expert. He was the first person that hired me into ITAM, and
Nice.
he really got me my start. So, but yeah, everybody, Rich, yourself, people who I would literally, when I was, no, really, when I was, when I was just learning and I would Google anything I could find about SAM and ITAM, and I was reading articles that you and all these other amazing people would write. That's how I got where I am today. So
Cheers,
I
Rebecca. I'll
got it
PayPal you
forward.
after we finish recording. Yeah, was it £20 we agreed for that? Yeah, £20.
Exactly.
No, but also, Rebecca, I have learned so much about open source. Sorry if we have genuinely scared her, because it's kind of shocked me, the figures and the numbers and the vulnerabilities out there. And we
Yeah,
did get a bit deep with the looking at the world in a negative way and how it can be weaponized. But there's
yeah,
so much cool stuff with open source. So yeah, ITAM people,
sure.
please don't keep pushing it down the road. Otherwise, we'll send Rebecca after you.